The King's Archer. Prologue. Ruana Laymar, a tall, 14-year-old girl with jet black hair and deep green eyes, the signature look of the Laymars. Like many of her clan, she was gifted musically, which was mainly expressed on the flute. She was an expert archer, having been with a bow and arrow from her early childhood. But perhaps most importantly, she was from the mysterious wondrous realm of Mareme. A world filled of talking dragons, brave knights, awesome adventures, and equally extraordinary natural wonders. However, this could hardly be the description of Ruana's meager existence in Kiplar, a tiny village tucked away in a forgotten remote valley somewhere within the wild range that is the Maremesian hinterlands. Even with her unusual giftings, she was just another insignificant girl from another country village. Or, at least that is what people in that world would think about her, whether or not they would give voice to that opinion, and most would not dare voice that when Ruana held her bow. She never really gave this much thought, but she seriously doubted she would ever become anything greater than a girl from a virtually forgotten village, or that she would ever leave her village, for nothing much changed in her small town of 100 or so. That is, until a mysterious woman from the outside world came through Ruana's tiny village one day in early spring. That day, Ruana's meager existence would significantly change. No, it would not significantly change. It would change Ruana's life forever. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Woman. Our story begins on the old, well-trod dirt road leading to Kiplar's ancient moss-covered well, which has been the village's main water source for time out of mind. We are in a thick forest of mainly large, ancient oak trees. A little bluebird flutters about the branches. If you listen closely, you can hear the rushing water of the small creek that is just beyond that large rock. A golden brown deer emerges from the woods, its nose in the grass. Suddenly, its head snaps up, alarmed. The unnerved creature darts away, just before the perturbed Ruana enters a woodland clearing. Her clothes are common Mareme style, a cream-colored shirt, topped by a gold-colored tunic, with navy blue edges, olive green-colored pants, and amber-colored boots. Little does she know that this seemingly ordinary day would set into motion the extraordinary events that would characterize the rest of her life. "Why does father have to leave me with Aunt Remy anyway?" Ruana grumbled. She would much prefer to be with her father, but that would be quite impossible, as he was a soldier in the great Maremesian army. "If she has her will, she shall drive me mad. I will never have social graces. Why do I even need them? It's not as if I am of royal or noble blood. Unfortunately, I will never encounter those types." Ruana took a breath and muttered, "If only I could leave." Ruana walked to the well, but slowly realizing what leaving her little village would mean. "But how can I? I have nothing outside of here," she thought, as she began the process of filling the bucket. But it was interrupted when she heard the alarming sound of a twig snap. Her head snapped up to see just who it was that approached. A woman stepped out of the forest. The woman was average height with piercing periwinkle eyes and the brightest red hair Ruana had ever seen. Kiplar was severely lacking in redheads. She wore a white dress with gold trim that was somewhat masked by a forest green cloak. Ruana had never seen her before, and in Kiplar, everyone knew everyone. It was impossible for Ruana to have missed her, especially one who looked so different from most others in that tiny town. "Who are you? Why are you here?" Ruana questioned, somewhat bluntly. Like most in her small, isolated town, Ruana tended to be somewhat suspicious of outsiders, not that they had much opportunity to show that suspicion. Yet even though Ruana knew she had never seen the woman before, Ruana thought she was oddly familiar. Someone from Riplar, maybe? She certainly does not look like anyone from Kiplar. Riplar was a larger, compared to Kiplar, town about 2 kurts, a measurement equal to about 1.5 miles away from Kiplar. It was Kiplar's only connection to the outside world. The woman paused and bit her lip. She knew she could not reveal her true identity to Ruana. Not yet, but oh how she longed, no yearned for. But that wonderful day would come soon enough. After all, she had waited 14 years. What was the few months that it would take Ruana to make the journey? "Who I am is not important. Why I am here Well, that is a different matter entirely, the woman answered, with just enough elusiveness to make Ruana quite interested and equally curious. Ruana made eye contact with the woman. She had an honest look about her, so Ruana decided to continue the conversation. If nothing else, it was an unexpected escape, even for but a mere moment. So tell me, why are you here? The woman looked right into Ruana's eyes. To tell you of a land where a good king reigns. Ruana raised an eyebrow. Why me? The woman pressed her lips together. That question is beyond me, but if you have the courage to leave all you have ever known, you will find in that land truer nobility and excellence than you can possibly imagine. What the woman told her had a great appeal to Ruana. She had never been the sort who wanted for courage, and such a place as this sounded almost heavenly. How do I get there? And why would one land's dwellers have such qualities? Because they serve the pinsayer, the woman smiled. And who is the pinsayer? Ruana asked, curious about someone who had such a mysteriously intriguing name. He is the creator and master of the world. Without any more explanation, she withdrew a package from inside her cloak. She handed it to Ruana, who took it. She opened it to reveal a book, a map, a compass, a key, and a letter. These will get you there. The journey is long and hard, the woman paused and smiled, knowing what Ruana would find in that blessed land. But I think you will find the gain worth the difficulty. Ruana stared at the ornate objects in her hands. They were some of the nicest items she'd ever laid her deep green eyes on. But why are you giving these to me? Ruana looked up and took in a sharp breath. The woman was gone. Where did she go? Ruana wondered aloud. I had so much that I wished to ask of her. She went and sat on a nearby gray boulder and ran her finger along the ornate cover of the leather-bound book. It was leather, the color of flaming crimson, with bright silver lettering proudly proclaiming, Book of the King. Its corners were held together by silver plating. There was a beautiful design embossed in the cover that was a mess of swirls and spirals. It was handwritten instead of typed, which only added to the mystery and adventure the book seemed to contain. I've never seen a book of this quality, she muttered excitedly as she opened the book. Kiplar was severely lacking in books of any sort, much less a book of such an obvious high quality as this one. And of these books, most were in her father's study. Ruana softly read the first part aloud. The map and compass to light the way, the key to unlock and save, the letter to receive entrance to the country of the king. Do not lose heart. All will be made right, even if it takes until the end of time. She paused her reading and began to contemplate exactly what the words meant. I suppose I understand the second line and the third line. At least it seems easy enough. But I hardly understand how a map and compass could light the way. And just how is a key supposed to save? Why would it take so long to make something right? She sighed and ran her fingers through her thick hair, hating having questions she could not answer. But I think if Ruana had been more familiar with poetry, she would have likely understood what was to her a rather odd. As Ruana read on, she realized that was the first of the mysteries contained in the wondrous pages of the book, though there were far more than mysteries within the book. It also contained history, both of the origins of that world, but mostly the history of Crenn Riaeth, this mysterious, enchanting land of the king. She became so engrossed in the book that she hardly had any thought as to how long she had been there. History had always been one of Ruana's favorite subjects. It was as if time had ceased. But of course, time marched on as steadily as it always did. She looked up at least an hour later and noticed the rather obvious change in the shadows. That is rather strange, Ruana thought. I wonder why. She glanced at the sun. The blood drained from her face. The sun was setting low in the western sky, just starting to show the first signs of setting. The sky was starting to morph from its usual blue to brilliant red, orange, and gold hues. It cannot be, Ruana muttered in utter shock. She was so stunned that for a moment she did not move. Then reality set in, as she realized her predicament with no small amount of horror, I must add. Her relationship with Remy was at best strained. She hastily placed the items the woman gave her in her rather aged leather satchel. She ran to the town well and quickly filled the old wooden bucket. Running as fast as her legs could take her, Ruana took off down the twisted rocky trail, desperate to avoid the almost certain coming conflict with Aunt Remy. Chapter 2. The Argument. "Where are you off to in such a rush, Ruana?" an old woman paused, sweeping her porch to ask. "No time to explain," Ruana hastily replied as she hurried by. The woman's husband stepped out of their cottage that looked like it came directly out of a storybook containing fairy tales. "Who were that?" "That Laymar lass, Ruana," the woman answered. "Doubtless you were late for something again. Don't tell her what her Aunt Remy will do. If there be one thing Remy Laymar cannot stand, it's being late." "Ah," the man uttered. "I wonder why Rudimel leaves his daughter with Remy. It's pretty clear the lass would like to be with her father far more than her aunt." "Well, it's not like the lad has many options," the woman replied, calling him lad, even though Rudimel was well into his 40s. What with his wife dead and the same for the rest of the family, except in Remy. And being a soldier, he can't take the girl with him, even though the lass be a good archer. They wouldn't let a lass her age join, despite it being obvious how much she'd rather fight than do nearly anything else. "But wouldn't he have enough money to retire from the army?" the man asked. "He's been in for years, and with the Laymar fortune, too." "From what I heard, that was little more than a rumor," the woman replied, with genuine disappointment. "I wish it weren't, if only for the girl's sake." "Aye, if ever a girl deserved such a fortune, it be Ruana Laymar, despite her being more than a bit unusual," the man sighed. "Or maybe the lass looks too much like her mum, and it brings back to me painful memories." "Ruana does look like the Laymar version of her mum." "And she does hang after her," the woman agreed. "Or maybe we're just making too much out of something that not be our business." "Aye," the man said, with a twinkle in his old blue eyes. "We might just be gossiping old neighbors, talking about things that we don't need to be discussing. Just because we have nothing better we could be doing. Or maybe we might just be right." "You really don't think Rudimel's avoiding being here with Ruana just because she looks like her mom, do you?" the woman asked, surprised. "I'm just thinking out loud," the man said. "I don't know the lad well enough to say, but I think we'd be wise to keep our eyes on the lass, and on that cottage, especially since Rudimel can't as much as he should." He pointed down the road towards Remy's house. "Agreed," the woman said, then she grimaced. "I don't think I want to know what's going on there now." "What took you so long?" Aunt Remy snapped as she flung open the door, nearly the moment after Ruana first knocked on the cottage's door. "Fetching water does not take an hour. Are you trying to make me worry? And you likely forgot it with your scatterbrain." Ruana could hardly help but smirk at the thought of Remy being worried about her. Ruana thought that even Remy could come up with a better attempt at sincerity than that. She would have replied, but before she could, Remy sighed and added in a quieter, though far more exaggerated tone, "What delayed you this time?" If you wish to better understand Remy's words, here's a short explanation. Ruana tended to, in Remy's words, dawdle in an amazingly slow manner. For Ruana and most other people, it was merely doing things at a normal rate. Remy was the sort of person who was nearly impossible to please, especially if your name happened to be Ruana Laymar. I would say nearly impossible as being quite generous. "If you really wish to know, there's an outsider at the well, and she gave me a book, a compass, a key, a map, and a letter, and she told me about the land of the king," Ruana replied with a touch of defiance. "And if it were up to me, I would be leaving tomorrow." Ruana was wise enough to not voice her last thought. Remy would prove to be angry enough with only knowing the events. Remy's grip tightened on the wooden chair in front of her. She released her grip and slowly turned to face Ruana, breathing heavily. "What did the outsider look like?" she said, punctuating every syllable. It was as though she had guessed who the outsider might be. Ruana thought it was an odd question, but she answered with the truth, as lying even to Remy was simply out of the question. "Red hair, blue eyes, average height." "It cannot be," Remy thought. "She went to that land years ago." Another thought flashed across Remy's mind. A sickening thought for her. But it is not uncommon for the enemy to send out messengers to other lands, to propagate their misguiding, deceitful message of a good king. And if they want Ruana to go there, it makes sense to send her. Ruana saw the look of odd horror on Remy's face. "What is wrong?" Remy's face turned into one of fake sincerity. She chuckled and spoke. "You have been taken in by a liar. The king of Crenn Riaeth is a tyrant and has no right to wear the crown. He is a pretender and not the true king, for the true line died out long ago." Ruana staggered back. She expected a less than friendly reaction from her aunt, but certainly not that. "The very look on your face tells me everything," Remy said as she pushed back her nearly white blonde hair. That outsider was simply lying. A convincing lie, no doubt, but a lie nonetheless. Defiantly, Ruana looked directly into Remy's eyes as she said, "I care not what you say." There was no lie in the woman's eyes. A grin crept on Ruana's face as she said, "I will go there whether you want me to or not." "Ruana, be reasonable. You are willing to leave your life here simply on the words of a stranger? And I think not that you would be able to detect a lie in someone. And anyway, what would your father think?" Remy inquired, trying to veil her insults. Ruana stiffened at the way Remy used her father as a weapon. "My father would understand, and I know he would come with me." She spoke through a clenched jaw. "No, he would not." Remy spat out every word. "How would you know?" Ruana shot back. "He is my brother. I have known him far longer than you," Remy replied, with an air of superiority that tried to drive itself into Ruana like a knife. But Ruana was far too resistant for such a tactic to accomplish anything. Ruana gritted her teeth. "I care not about how long you have known my father." She could not help but think, though she was wise enough not to voice it. "Nor do I care about anyone else you know or anything else you think." Remy raised her eyebrow. She knew Ruana well enough to guess the next statement to come from Ruana's mouth, and it would certainly not be to Remy's liking. "And I will go to Crenn Riaeth," Ruana coolly said, "with or without your approval." Ruana spun on her heel and began to walk back to her room, secretly grinning. She'd never got in the last word with her aunt. "No, you are not," Remy hissed, instantly killing any hope left to Ruana. And the look on Aunt Remy's face was enough to send chills down the spine of even the bravest of souls. Chapter 3. The Letter from Father. That night was a long, sleepless one for Ruana. Her Laymar temper was flaring like it never had before. Why would Remy not want Ruana to go to the land of the king? Remy had all but said at various times that her life would be nearly perfect were it not for Ruana. Why would she even care what Ruana did? It was not as if Remy was in the habit of caring about her niece. Ruana felt like running away, but something before unknown within her held her back. The next morning finally came, along with a messenger. "Letter for Ruana Laymar." "That is me," Ruana said. The messenger handed her the envelope, touched his cap in farewell, and left. Ruana tore into the letter's envelope. It was so rare for her to receive a letter, so she was excited. That would only grow once she realized who wrote the letter. "It is from Father," Ruana whisper shouted. The brief letter read as follows. "Ruana, I have found true happiness and peace here in Crenn Riaeth, or if you do not prefer the old tongue, the King's Land. I want you to join me here. Please come as soon as you can. Love, Father." Ruana had never been so happy in her life. "Aunt Remy!" "What?" Aunt Remy yawned. It was rather early in the morning for her. "Read this." Ruana held the letter out to Aunt Remy, grinning in triumph. Even Remy was not so blind to think it was a forgery. It was clearly Rudimel's handwriting. "This is from your father?" "Yes." "And he wants you to join him?" "Yes." "Then I suppose you must go," Remy said darkly, as if the whole thing was complete insanity, which she clearly thought it was. Though not even Ruana could have guessed what lay behind that belief of her aunt's. Ruana was practically dancing, she was so thrilled, remarkable given Ruana's lack of ability or interest in any sort of dancing. But Remy held up a finger. "If you can find someone to go with you. I simply will not have you running through the entirety of the Mareme countryside by yourself. Surely even you have enough self-respect to refrain from such an embarrassment to yourself and the family," Remy said, secretly hoping Ruana would not be able to find anyone, and therefore this whole nonsense would be dropped. "You say that as if I do not have a reputation of running through the countryside already," Ruana thought, before replaying Remy's words in her mind. She certainly did not mind Remy not going, but she was curious why. "You are not going?" "No, I have duties, responsibilities. I cannot leave them," Remy replied stiffly. Ruana could not help but hear a good amount of offense in her aunt's tone. She certainly wondered why, but thought it best not to ask Remy. "Nor would I move to the lands of my enemy." "Then I will go find someone." She turned and marched out the door. At this point, I must stop and explain something. Why would Remy be so willing to let Ruana go when the previous night she was so adamant about Ruana not leaving? Contrary to what the old couple thought, Ruana's father Rudimel was rather wealthy, having received the entire fortune of the Laymars. Ruana was to receive all of his wealth unless something happened to her. Then, and only then, would it go to Remy, who would then be the only known remaining relative of Ruana's father. Had he any other relative, it would go to them. It was for greed, not for Ruana's sake, that Remy let her go. She had also never liked Ruana, if you had not noticed, and this was a wonderful opportunity to be rid of her for a few glorious weeks, if not permanently. Remy never thought Ruana would last more than a month at most. Remy had never been so wrong in her life. Ruana almost immediately found someone to go with her, or rather two somebodies: Kieri, Ruana's best friend, and Corbeth, Kieri's twin brother. The two siblings' parents had traveled to Crenn Riaeth a few months prior. The twins had not gone, as their parents wished to complete the process of moving before Kieri and Corbeth came, but they had recently received word they had completed the process. They packed, saddled the horses, and set out. Now you may be wondering why, if the parents of Ruana's closest friends were in Crenn Riaeth, why had not Ruana heard of it? The answer is a simple one. Ruana knew of the move and that Kieri would soon be leaving. What she could never quite remember was where exactly they were moving to. Whether you want to put it down for an unusual bout of bad memory on Ruana's part, or some dark scheme of her aunt's to prevent Ruana from knowing of Crenn Riaeth, I shall let you decide. In the meantime, let us rejoin Ruana and company. They rode out from Kiplar's Valley. Ruana turned her horse, Mayat, around to gaze at Kiplar for the last time. Though oddly enough, it was not a moment of sadness as much as it was excitement. Kieri noticed Ruana had stopped. "Are you coming, Ruana?" Of course. Ruana turned her horse towards the trail, leaving Kiplar and her old laugh behind. Unfortunately, it is here we must leave Ruana and company to return to the rather abysmal place that is Remy's cottage. There is a crucial scene taking place in Aunt Remy's house, and it will be surprisingly important to this tale. I cannot believe that brother of mine moving to... She was so mad she could not think up the words. To there. She could not bring herself to say the name of that blessed land, nor could she think up a word that she would consider dark enough. She paused before continuing her rant. Her anger had increased so much that she could not speak. The rage subsided a few moments later before she continued. What was he thinking? Aunt Remy muttered, her Laymar temper showing. She was beyond furious. She paced around for a few moments. Rudimel, I have known you to do some extremely ill-advised things in the past, but this takes all. Her talking stopped, but her pacing did not for a few moments. When her pacing finally ceased, Remy gripped the back of a chair, her knuckles turning a deathly white. I must do something to stop this. Think, Remy, think. She stopped talking and sat down, absolutely infuriated, which would prove to cloud her ability to reason. Suddenly, an idea popped into her mind. Aha! That is it. Her eyes lit up with evil delight. Perhaps he can put an end to this madness. She walked to the wooden desk, took out a feather pen and paper, and began to write a letter to Grimnall. Now, who exactly is Grimnall, you may ask? Well, Grimnall is a monster of the lowest sort, a gruesome beast. All the words to describe anything evil would not fully describe that vile creature. In fact, he was even shunned by the Maremesian dragons. He was so gruesome. If you know anything about Maremesian dragons, you will know that being shunned by them for being so cruel is no small feat. Aunt Remy is going to use that hideous creature to try to stop Ruana from going to the land of the king. Now you may be wondering why Aunt Remy let Ruana go just to try to stop her. Aunt Remy's plan was to let Ruana go, have Grimnall stop her, return her to Kiplar, and convince her it was all a dream. Laymars are known for having rather vivid dreams. She also believed this would endear her to her brother, Ruana's father, giving Remy a leg up in receiving Ruana's inheritance, which Remy desperately wanted. She had failed to recall that her brother was living in Crenn Riaeth, but anger prevents a person from completely thinking things through. This was especially true in this situation. But money was never far from Remy's thoughts. Tragically, greed had long since captured Remy. Now this was certainly not the greatest of plans, but she was not thinking as clearly as she should, given her anger. Whether or not she succeeds in her plans with Ruana, we'll just keep reading.